Hartford. Welcome to another edition of Hartford Community Leaders. Got a wonderful program for you today. We actually just sit back, relax, join us 1 hour of good programming. Hey, just wanted you to tell a friend, tell a neighbor that we're on. I want to take this opportunity to thank our staff who volunteer, who comes in every week, volunteer their time graciously. I want to thank Tristan Nelson, who's our chief engineer. I want to thank Mike and Armando for our cameras. And I want to thank our co-host, Lakia and Siobhan Leitner. They do a great job, make sure the programming is happening. Hey, we're bringing you a special edition of Hartford Community Leaders on today. And today, we're going to be talking about work being done in the community. And we have a special guest here. and I'm not going to give it away. And I'm going to let Lakia give the bio and information and introduce our guest. But before that, just want to say that school time is happening just quickly now, and we have to make sure that our communities are safe, make sure the kids are on sidewalks, make sure that they have crossing guards, make sure that you have parents next to kids crossing the streets. We have a lot that's going on right now, and so we want to make sure that the youth safety is so very important in our schools. And we need for the parents to participate and watch each other's kids and children, because there's so much things happening out there. And so if we can do that, that will be great. Parents watching kids and other children, other parents' children in the community. That's how we should do in a circle of compassion there. When we were younger, we had the neighbors watching the kids on the block, on the streets. If we did anything, the first thing that a parent would do is call the mother up. And we need to get back to that. When we see the children not doing right in the community, we call the parents up and let them know what's going on. And we went to the different parents' house for dinner. They was able to take us in, and I mean, it was a community, a loving community. We gotta get back to the loving community. And without further ado, I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna give it over to Lakia.
Thanks,
and she's
Dr.
going
Francis.
to give us a.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have the one and only Sharon H. Chang. She was born here in Connecticut. She's also an award-winning author, photographer, activist with a lens on racism, social justice, and Asian American studies. She's the author of critically acclaimed academic book, Raising Mixed Race, Multiracial Asian Children in a Post-Racial World, and her newly released memoir, Hapotels and Other Lies, a Mixed Race Memoir about the Hawaii I Never Knew. Her writing has also appeared in the BuzzFeed, Think Progress, Racism Review, Hyphen Magazine, Parent Map Magazine, South Seattle Emerald, the Seattle Globalist, AAPI Voices and International Examiner. Sharon was named 2015 Social Justice Communitor of the Year by the Seattle Globalist, and 2016 favorite local API author and writer by working her third book and looking at Asian American women, gender, and race, to be the co-author, permanent sociologist Joe R. Fegan. Welcome.
Hi, thank
Sharon,
you for having me.
Would you like to show us your book?
Yes.
Okay,
so here's my first one. This was Raising Mixed Race, Multiracial Asian Children in a Post-Racial World. This came out at the end of 2015. And then my newest book, Hapotels and Other Lies.
Yes.
All right.
I just got this last night, and it was meant to be because I was going to be here. This is the very, very first paperback copy. Is coming out September 15th, so next month.
Wonderful. What motivates you to write?
See, they made all these hard questions for me, and now I have to get my brain to working. What motivates me to write? In my case, what motivates me to write is that I have something to say, or I feel that there are other voices who are not being heard. And Yeah, so it's definitely about uplifting marginalized communities, unheard voices. Sometimes that's my voice, but sometimes it's also other voices. And you know, I've written as a journalist. I also write my own stories. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Do you plan to write your experience about living in Connecticut?
This is a good question.
Thank you.
It's been, the last time I was here, my son was 9 months old, and he's 8 now.
Wow.
So it felt like it was time to come back to where I was born. I lived here till I was 8. I was born in Hartford. And we've been like talking about the stories that I remember from my formative years. But also I visited here every year growing up, even after we moved away. So like Connecticut is actually a big part of my story, and I still haven't written about it.
Yeah.
So while we've been here, I've been like unpacking all my memories and trying to journal, and I'm like, is there another book in here? There must be. But it's interesting to kind of look up the history of Hartford and imagine where I fit into that. I mean, we can go on and on, but as a mixed race person, as the child of a Taiwanese immigrant, and so I think there's something there, but there's some research that needs to be done first.
What's your favorite book that you ever written before?
That I've ever written or read?
Written.
That I've written?
Yeah.
Oh, of these two?
Okay.
I've written these two, so of these two, I have to pick. I don't think I can do that. They're really different. I can't pick. I think they're both equally my favorites.
Okay.
They're also different. So Raising Mixed Race is more of an academic book, and there's more like research and data and theory, and it's based on interviews with 68 parents of mixed race children. And this one is research-driven memoir. So this is more my story, and there's some research in here and historical background, but it's more personal essay and memories and stories. So I think I have to say they're both my favorite.
All right. Now,
Can I say that?
Yes. Now I saw that book advertised at the Mixed Remix Festival.
Oh, good.
Do you plan to speak there?
I haven't been yet. Have you been?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm going next year.
Awesome.
It's going to be a different. They're not going to do it in the summer next year.
Oh, it's in
They're
the
gonna do it in
fall,
fall,
right?
yeah.
LA?
Mhm.
Yeah. I haven't been yet.
Okay.
So I feel like I need to put
Yes,
it
and
on
you
my
need to
list.
present your books.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can
Yeah.
be on the panel and
Yeah.
and they give out awards too.
Well, if you're recommending it, I'm going. Heidi, right, is the person who found
Yeah,
it.
she's the founder of it.
Yeah.
Let's
Yes.
talk about your book title now.
This one, the
is
new one?
Hapa Tales. The
Hapa
book-
Tales and Other Lives.
Now, what inspired you to give that title?
Oh my gosh, this title is so triggering for a lot of people. Are you familiar with the word Hapa, or where that even comes from? It's okay if you're not. 'Cause
No.
The further east you go, the less people know about it,
Yes.
because it's a Hawaiian word.
Okay.
And so people in Hawaii know it. On the West Coast, some folks know it, and then the further east you go, the less people know it, because it's just geography. But Hapa is a Hawaiian word that was conceived, I think it was derived from a Latin-based language, possibly English, but it was conceived within the native Hawaiian language to describe mixed race,
Oh, okay.
native Hawaiian children.
All right.
And politically, it was conceived to claim those children into the native Hawaiian ohana, their extended family, because they were almost wiped out by colonizer diseases and other oppressions. So it was a way of surviving and thriving. So in Hawaii, people, it means part, understand that it's a Hawaiian word and use it to describe part Hawaiian children and people, but I think also more broadly anyone who's part mixed or part. It has become controversial though,
Okay.
because right around the 90s, a lot of folks on the mainland here on the continent, particularly along the West Coast, got wind of it and really liked it. And you may be familiar with the experience of being mixed. There's often this feeling of like not belonging anywhere, and what are the racial words I get to use to describe myself? I'm sort of part this, part that. It can feel lonely, and so there were a lot of folks who are not Hawaiian up and down the West Coast, but like partially maybe Asian, of Asian descent, who decided they wanted to use this word to identify. The problem is they used it ahistorically, and they didn't acknowledge the native Hawaiian roots, and in doing, they sort of erased the native Hawaiian story.
Oh, okay.
And so then we're sort of circling back around to that erasure of indigenous people that we're cursed with in this country, but is also part of continuing to like take their land and disenfranchise them. So It's there, but I don't identify as Hapa. It's there so that it comes up in searches when people are like, what is this whole Hapa thing?
Right.
But it's very triggering for a lot of people in the Hawaii community and sometimes up and down the West Coast too. So that's why I called it Hapa Tales and Other Lies. It's me going to Hawaii and unpacking all these things about like, okay, so I'm this mixed Asian person. People think I belong in Hawaii. I'm supposed to be Hapa, but like, what is this about? And really coming to a lot of realizations when I was actually there on the land, right?
And so when will your book be released?
September 15th.
Okay.
Very soon.
Right.
So put it on your calendars, folks.
Yes. I'm so excited. I'm talking about it in the place where I was born. It feels like super profound.
Now, what is like the message that you would like to portray from your book to, you know, the message that you would like to portray to your audience for the
This
book?
one? Yeah, that's a good question. This one I wrote really is like an I was thinking a lot of young people, so I don't know if you're familiar with the census statistics. You probably are, but it was only in the 2000 census for the first time that folks were allowed to select more than one race to self-identify. So this is, up until that point, you couldn't be legally mixed race in this country. You'd pick one thing or another, and that became like a cultural norm, right? So this is a pretty new conversation to be able to say like, oh, I'm mixed, you know. More and more young people are claiming that identity. It's different for older generations, but so we see that it's a really young demographic and also that it's growing exponentially. So I do some work in high schools and I support young mixed people. And what I see a lot is that loneliness that I talked about, like where do I fit? How do I describe my experience? I don't even have language to say what it is. I sort of belong in these communities, but there are ways that I don't, and there are ways that I'm kept out. So this book is a lot about that feeling of liminality, like floating in between and sort of searching for where we belong, and thinking about like land too, and where do we belong in terms of geography and nation and all that kind of stuff. It's also a call for any mixed identifying person to be careful, because when you feel alone, it's easy to just pick something and not be critical about it, and you can really slide into oppressing other people of color. So it's really just this like storytelling to hopefully affirm other mixed folks, particularly young folks, to feel like, hey, let's talk about these experiences. Like, let's just bring them out as uncomfortable as they can be and sort of figure it out together. It's not really an answer book. It's not like, oh, I read this and I got all the answers to all my questions. It's sort of like learning to feel comfortable in the uncomfortability of the questions. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. I understand.
Yeah.
Will there be a movie based on your books?
I wish. I don't know. I think like mixed stuff is still pretty obscure, so we'll see. Maybe you'll make it.
Well, you know, Key and Peele, I don't know if you know them.
Oh, yeah.
They're always at the festival, and I'm sure if you talk with them, they will shoot it for you. They would.
Well,
they're so down to earth. I know they're celebrities. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They're celebrities, but they are like so down to earth. They don't have their nose up in the air at people.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
okay,
so you bring
another reason why I need to go next time.
Yeah, because they will do it for you.
Be like fangirling.
Yes.
Let's talk about your other book that you wrote also.
Yeah.
And you said it's about the different races.
Yeah, so for this one, I'll hold it up again, Raising Mixed Race, this was more academic, and I went out into the field and I interviewed 68 parents of 72 young mixed race children of partial Asian descent. So that was not all Asian white, although that's what people assume. There was also black mixed families in that group as well. And I just asked them questions about, like, what do you know about race? How do you identify? And then how are you raising your kids to have positive multiracial identity? And a lot of this is because when we are thinking about race as adults, a lot of the work we need to end up doing is looking back to the stories that we were told when we were children about who we are. And sometimes we have to spend more time unpacking that and like all our energy instead of like moving forward, right? Because our parents struggled for whatever reason. And so I was curious, like, what are young parents today teaching these young mixed kids? And I can't say it was all good news. But anyways, it's in a book, and so now there's suggestions, and, you know, I've heard it's a slow burn, so it came out a few years ago, but people still contact me that they're reading it. And unfortunately, there's not a lot out there yet. still
Yes.
about mixed kids, so there's not a lot of resources. So note to you all, please write more books about raising mixed children or being mixed people. Yeah.
That's right.
You think right now you see a lot of college students in mixed race relationships. Do you think now it's being accepted more?
Yeah, that's a tough question.
'Cause
You
I
should
mean-
weigh in too.
Yeah, because you see it everywhere you go. I mean, you see a mixed race.
Mm-hmm.
Man, woman.
Yeah,
woman,
interracial
man.
couples.
Yes.
Yeah, it's more accepted now
Yeah,
Yes.
than
I think to
50 years ago before the
Mhm.
Loving case took
Right.
place. Yeah.
I think to a great extent, it's more visible.
Yes.
It's legal now.
Yes.
That's another big
yes,
change.
that's another big change. Thanks to
Yeah.
the Loving case
Mhm.
Yeah,
in Virginia.
I mean, only 1967 was it actually federally legal to be in an interracial relationship, so that's pretty new. And they're certainly using interracial couples in advertising all the time.
Yes.
Because they think it's going to sell. So I think yes, but there are some studies that are showing, like on a surface level, people accept it, but when you really dig deep, the prejudice can
It
still be
still
very
exists.
entrenched.
Yeah.
So we still have a lot of work to do, but I think
Yeah.
we've taken steps forward.
Okay.
Yes. You have anything else?
Oh, you got it.
Let's see. What's your favorite place to travel? Because I know you travel a lot. So what's your favorite place? And I know you're doing a book tour. So what place are you excited the most about visiting?
That's a tough question. So I'm gonna go to Minneapolis
Okay.
in October. And I never ever thought to go to the Twin Cities
Okay.
for any of the work that I do. I feel very like bi-coastal, having been born in New England and then having grown up partially in California. So I just don't think about the middle of the country very much, I'll be honest. But when I announced that I was booking my tour for Hoppa Tales, I got asked to go to the Twin Cities more than any other place.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go to the Twin Cities. And I have started researching and learning about that area of the country. It's pretty fascinating. There's a huge artistic community and literary community there. A large Asian refugee activist community. I'm pretty excited to go meet those folks. They're doing really cool things out there.
Yes.
Yeah. Have
Stay
you
there.
been?
No, I haven't been.
Have you been, Dawn?
No. So I mean, the goal for you. What is the goal for you? I mean, to reach an individual. I know you've written a book. I know some of the things that you haven't written in the book that you should have written in the book that didn't get to this book, or maybe going to the next book. But what are like the goal, and what do you want to see happen?
Yeah.
From writing these
Such a
two
good
books.
question.
I mean, you have contact with many mixed race families, many couples. What is the goal? I mean, when you reach out to them, what is the goal? I mean, what have they expected out of this book?
I don't know what they've expected. This is such a good question. I know, and I was just talking to my Aunt Donna, who I'm staying with while I'm here, about this. I think the goal is to influence people, for sure. That was her word, so I'm giving her credit for that.
Okay.
She's a librarian by
All
career.
right.
She knows
Okay.
books well. Definitely to influence people to consider things they may not have considered before, and that can be mixed folks and non-mixed identifying folks too. But also to make some room for youth, mixed identifying youth, because at the table, at the race table now, there still isn't a lot of room for folks who identify that way. And I just want to emphasize, it's not taking away from other seats at the table, just adding a seat to the table. So I really see that young people need that. They're feeling frustrated and they don't have a space to explore their story. And also, it's to complicate the conversation about mixed race, because there's like a kind of shallow understanding of what it is. It's kind of dominated by like the advertising and media and movies, and this kind of like very glamorous idea of mixed race people are going to end racism and they're all beautiful and smart, and it's not really true. We're not all that way. It's kind of a stereotype.
Right.
So really humanizing our experience and showing that we're not all like one kind of people.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah. So that kind of stuff, like nuancing it more.
Now, do you feel as though like mixed race people, is it more private? they try to keep their life more private, because it seems like, I know you, Lakia, you've talked to individuals, and sometimes people feel as though they don't want their privacy.
Well, I think it's the society. Society wants to tell you who you are. But like my mom told me, she said, don't change. She said, you're going to have those ignorant people trying to tell you to stay in one box. But just know who you are. So I think if you have that wisdom early on, you know what society says doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people feel that way. They tend to hide it because they didn't have the parent to tell them it's okay to be who you are and don't change.
That's also a good question. I think I hear what you're asking. Tell me if I'm not clear answering. I think there is still a lot of pressure for people who could identify as mixed to not identify.
Right.
And there's political reasons, which I totally validate, for why there's a lot of fear in having mixed children do that. There's a fear that it's going to reduce numbers for populations of color, and that it will then reduce funding and access to resources or various things. So I think there's a lot of community work we need to do around that, where it's can we still allow young children and young people to identify as mixed and also as members of their other groups without having to give up any of it.
That's right.
Yeah. So but because of that pressure, I see sometimes a lot of mixed people just sort of they just decide one thing and they're gonna stay there.
I know we've got some questions out there.
Ooh, questions. I bet they're gonna
Since it seems like interracial couples are in every commercial nowadays, a lot more than years past. I think we covered that.
Yes, we covered it.
But I'll add, and I think I sort of mentioned this, that's the kind of stuff that I want to make sure we're also being critical about, because I think there's a way that interracial couples and mixed race bodies are being used to sell things and sell this fantasy and this dream to an extent that it can erase actual human beings. So here's a great example. You're familiar with all the DNA testing that people do right now?
Yes.
There's a few big fancy companies like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. They tend to use mixed bodies a lot and people who are very ethnically ambiguous to sell their product. But they create these montages of these mixed people going on these journeys to all their ancestral lands and being accepted happily everywhere they go, and that's not actually what it's like.
That's right.
And so that ends up erasing the actual experience of being a mixed heritage person. So that's where I hope we can still move forward with our critical lens and our critical questions.
Is you wrote in your book on the different families, and you wrote your memoir, and so do you think you would like to have a group to have group conversation on mixed race to kind of get an idea of what other people have on their thoughts?
Yeah.
And, is that something that you want to achieve?
Definitely. I actually piloted a multiracial families group in Seattle with a nonprofit called Families of Color Seattle. Those my sisters. What's up? And I did it with my co-facilitator, Christine Tang, and we wrote the curriculum, and it continues to have sessions. I facilitated the first session. It's their best attended group of all family support groups they do.
Wow.
And that's for parents of young, school-age children.
Right.
So that's one kind of group we need. And those parents, the first group we did, half of the parents were mixed identifying themselves, and then half were not. And it was intense, profound, happy, sad, it was everything. That's definitely one thing we need. I think parents need support.
Right.
But again, I have to keep going to, I feel like youth really needs support. I'd like to see more student groups in high school, in college.
Yeah, because we have so much bullying, going on, and they may, think that the child is mixed race and start bullying the child, and I think that's what's needed, Or we had a situation where your sister, you told me that your sister is darker than you.
Yeah. Well, my first sister, she's light like me, but then my third sister, she's darker because we have different fathers. And she came to me and she says, Lakia, why are you lighter than me? And I had to say, hey, we have different fathers, you know.
Right.
So she didn't understand, you know, at that young 6-year-old age, why my skin tone is different than hers.
Yeah.
So I sat down and I talked with her, and our mother talked with her, and we actually showed her a DVD called Dark Girls.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I showed her a DVD, Light Girls, so
Yep.
she can get a better understanding, you know,
Yeah.
of the whole color thing.
Right, and so I would like our kids, you know, institutionally to have that support too. So
Mhm.
like in schools, like making sure their books that are in the classroom reflect their experience, or
Mhm.
when they get to high school that there are student groups. You know, they have like Black student unions, and we can do
Mhm.
mixed student unions too. And at the college level, it's still hard
Right.
for mixed kids to even find classes that are about their experience. They might be able to form like a group, but then
there's
they
no actual
can't.
class.
Yeah, I don't think you can even get a degree in critical mixed race studies yet. You can
No.
get maybe a minor in it, but you can't get
get
a full degree,
degree.
whereas you can in other ethnic studies like Asian American studies, but you can't in being of mixed heritage. So I would love to see a shift in this
Yeah.
direction.
So maybe you should be
Right?
a
Oh gosh,
professor.
no,
then,
you do it.
Then do it.
You're getting a PhD.
That's true. But I'm doing women's studies.
Okay.
That's my focus.
Oh, there you go. We'll have to like plan together.
Yes. Hey, I'm down. Let me know. Yeah.
Well, let's go to each book, right? And can you give us a little maybe your best passage in each book that, or your
Oh, I wish I had been prepared for this.
yeah,
I'm not sure right now.
I
Let
mean-
me look through it really quick.
or something by experience that you've in each book,
Yeah.
in your writings.
I'll have to
Yes.
paraphrase now because I'm not prepared to read a
Something
great passage.
that really energized you to write
Yeah.
that passage, and to
Oh, I know what I mean.
because there's certain areas where you say, yeah, I gotta get this out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want this message to be portrayed in the book.
Yeah. I think especially because we're in Hartford too, I want to say this, that I have a whole chapter in this first book, and I think a lot of people aren't aware that it's in here, called it's chapter 6 called Centering Blackness. And that's a call in to everybody, whether you're a Black heritage or not, to remember that this country was built on the backs of African American labor and African American resistance
And Native
protest.
Americans.
Yeah.
And Native
Well, I
Americans.
didn't talk about Indigenous people as much in this one, and that's how this one came about, because I
Okay.
started thinking more about indigeneity and theft of land.
Mhm.
But I talked in here about wherever we go with this mixed race understanding, that we always need to understand it within that context of like the civil rights movement and slavery, and that always has to be part of our understanding of who we are, and if it isn't, then we're astray and we need to come back to center.
That's right.
So that's one thing that was really important to me in this book. And you make a good point. This one is more about land and indigeneity and like who was actually here first,
That's right.
and who do we forget all the time, and then moving on, how do we construct these mixed race identities without forgetting the land's indigenous
That's
first
right.
peoples, and that wasn't in the first book as much, so that was sort of something that needed to happen here. But I would love to read the dedication for Hoppet Tales.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Can I read it?
yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sure.
It's pretty short, but I wanna read it because if anyone's listening, it might speak to you. This book is especially for mixed race people living in liminal state, feeling lonely and landless, yet still asking critical questions about the pursuit of racial justice everywhere. We have a place and purpose in that pursuit too, though it was never destined to be a singularly defined, easily understood, or simple one. Please keep on. You are brave and needed and not alone.
I like that.
Thinking that you wrote those 2 books and then you work with the different families and individuals, how did your family support you as far as writing the book?
Well, during the writing process, that's an interesting question. Right, you mean writing the books?
Yes.
Well, currently, the family that I have, my partner is also a mixed race identifying person. So his mother is a Japanese immigrant and his father's white. And then, of course, our son is mixed because we're both mixed. So they supported me in the sense of just being. Like, we're a whole family.
Right.
Like, I didn't grow up with that. I had parents of two different single racial groups. I didn't have a parent that looked like me or who was having the experience that I had. So there's just a lot when that's your family makeup, where you might be able to process with your parents, but probably not, and so you just deal with it yourself. But now in my family, I can just be like, oh, this person said this thing to me today, and my husband will be like, yep, pretty much. And that's like sometimes all you need when you're having experiences, right? It's just that, like, some person who gets it where you don't have to explain and justify why it's hard for you. But there were also times where I would bounce things off him, like, oh, this is really hard to word. I don't want to, go this way or that way. What do you think? And then he would offer something. My son, who's 8, will also offer me ideas now too. He's old enough that I'll say, so I want to do this, but what do you think? What do you think about this idea? And he's pretty honest with me. He'll just tell me what he thinks. And that's really helpful to get that kind of next generation perspective, because I'm not going to know what it's like for him. So they're great. Really supportive.
That's good.
That's good.
Now, did you have, like, other authors that you, as a young writer, that you read about, that inspired you? Who inspired you to write, actually?
Yeah. So first one, Raising Mixed Race. I was predominantly inspired by this book called The Myth of the Model Minority, which is about this model minority stereotype of Asians, that we're all good at math, we're all doctors, and we're fine, and we put our heads down and work hard, and we're quiet, therefore we're kind of invisible. It kind of busts open that myth and shows how it's a stereotype, and it really erases our experience. That was written by Rosalind Chow. I just had never read anything like it. It's an academic book also. And after I read it, I was like, I want to write something like this, but for, like, mixed folks. So she was a huge motivator for this one. For this one, I gotta say, I was more inspired by, like, books written by, like, Bell Hooks and Angela Davis that are, like, they're political, but they're also personal. They don't really fit in a genre, so there's, like, story, but there's analysis, and there's, like, a cry for social justice. So a lot of, like, women warriors who've written these kind of books that don't fall in a genre. That was definitely my inspiration for this one. And there's this really, really seminal, famous Native Hawaiian activist named Haunani K. Trask, who wrote a book called From a Native Daughter. And that was a huge, I really followed her lead in this book, a huge, huge contribution to the Native Hawaiian sovereignty movement.
And we want to go back to our viewers. We want to thank DJ Mackie C, who says here, great show today. DJ Mackie C, he's one of our sponsors.
And he sent a heart to you.
Oh!
Yes, and he's one of
Yes.
And we just want to say that this show airs on Mac Talk Radio, Internet Radio, and every Wednesday.
Yes.
Every Wednesday from 11 a.m.
to 12 p.m.
Yeah, 12 p.m. 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And tune in to Mac Talk Radio, Crazy Faith Radio, as the gospel section, and Mac Talk Radio is the community affairs. And also, we air on Brick TV in Brooklyn, New York.
Woohoo.
All right. And so, for those of you that are in Brooklyn, New York, thank you for watching. And also, hey, we're doing it here in Hartford. Got it going here. A live internet radio, and also public access, and also Brook TV, which is public access in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's doing great things. Impacting the community, getting a lot of calls in. So this book will be out September 15th.
September 15th.
And when did you publish this book?
End of 2015 it came out. Inside it says 2016. But yeah. So this one's been out for a while. You can get it at standard places on Amazon and stuff. Yeah.
So what is next for you?
Oh, that's a hard question.
What's next? I mean, after writing both of these books, what do you want to see happen?
Well, I am working on a third book, which I've been working on for a long time, and then our current president got elected. I don't know where you stand with that, but it kind of slowed me down. So I have a third book I'm working on Asian American women, race, and gender, and I interviewed over 70 Asian American women, mostly activists for that one. I think it's timely given what we're talking about these days, and I'm a little over halfway through that one. So that's definitely immediately next. But you're wondering about after that?
Yeah. Now, one topic that, and you might have read in papers about this topic, about individuals born with the different, type of gender, like male, female. Now, that, I think, as far as mixed race, and then the when they're born, with the two different organs, and how that affects them, I think that's, something that is private also, but also I think they deal with the same issues, right? And same things that they have to face during everyday life.
The same prejudice.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there's all sorts of ways we as human beings find to alienate and oppress people who are different.
Right.
And so I'm sure those folks face their own sets of oppression that are really painful. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so so you said, what do you want? Yeah, I know you said you wanted to write a book, but it's like speaking engagements.
I mean,
part of what you want to do.
Well, you do it when you write a book, and it's great. But I think writing is my first love. So
when did you start to write?
I mean,
when did you start to write?
Good question. It's hilarious because I was an avid reader as a little girl, and I didn't remember this until I wrote this first book, but I used to write all the time. At that time, I wrote a lot of science fiction. I don't think I finished anything, but I would just write, all the time on my word processor, because we didn't have computers really back then, or typewriter or whatever, just write. So I've been writing since I was really little, and then kind of took a break for a while, and then came back to it later in life. So writing for a long time. Back to your question about what do I want to keep doing. Writing is my big love, and I really want to see more resources out there for mixed race folks, like just more books, more zines, more art, more everything in the canon of stuff available. So right now, while there's not a lot, I just and I'm still able, I'm trying to write and contribute to that body of work, and I hope other people will keep doing that too. And particularly with the 2020 census coming up, we're going to see a big growth in the mixed race population, and I am expecting a lot of floundering from the community, like, oh no, there's a lot more mixed people than we realize, what do we do? And I would like folks to have things to turn to, like, oh, go to this, read this book, join this group, do this thing, watch this beautiful dance, or look at this art. So that's what feels really pressing to me right now.
All right.
And everybody needs to follow Lakia's great next work.
Thank you.
She's doing a lot of cool stuff.
Thank you. I have a question. Right after your book tour, do you plan to go back to your schools and speak?
Oh, that's a good question. I have thought about it. I have a friend in Seattle, and we are kind of brainstorming bringing a program to schools to support mixed youth, but it's still kind of in the brainstorming phase. So I think it's really important work. If I don't do it, I hope somebody does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will you be on CNN?
Probably not.
Because they have book TV on CNN.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, where you
okay.
actually,
See,
have
your
a
PR
session.
side.
Yep, see, everything's coming in. Where you actually talk about your books. Yeah.
Okay.
You just reach out to them.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll check them out. That's a good suggestion.
No problem.
So, you're writing. What energizes you when you're writing these books? I mean, something has to energize you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Where do I find my fire?
Because I mean, every day, you just don't get a pencil and a piece of paper and say, "Oh, I'm gonna write this."
I'm gonna write a book.
You don't do that, but
Yeah.
you have to be inspired to kind of do this. I mean, especially on this particular subject.
Yeah. I think there's, honestly, this probably isn't the most PC thing to say. I think it's getting pissed off. Getting angry, and seeing groups not being heard, voices not being heard, injustices being done and perpetuated and continued, and cycles
Right.
just happening and feeling like no one speaks up or says anything.
Right.
Whether it's speaking my own story or, acknowledging that I'm on the privileged side of somebody else's oppression, all that stuff makes me just feel like, oh, I gotta write about this. So that's where these two books have come from, for sure.
Yeah. Now, do you find it challenging in your writing for you to do research as far as, on, the different, on your topics that when you're writing?
I love researching, so challenging in the sense that it can be laborious and take a long time. Yeah, sometimes like going through a study and making sure you read the whole thing and then you cite it correctly can be a little time consuming, but I love researching, so I'm kind of a dork. I'm just like, yes, more data, give me more data.
Do you present like data analysis like in your books?
A little bit,
You
yeah.
touch on that subject?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not too heavily in this style of writing, but I definitely bring in other people's studies as often as I can, because, a lot of times when you're writing about a marginalized subject, you have the heavy burden of proof, right? People don't believe you. You have to prove it and prove it and prove it and prove it before they'll finally believe you.
That's right.
So, one of the goals you think, and one of our viewers out there just plainly said it, in commercials and what do you think about movies as far as, is that something that you want to see happen?
Yeah, well, we're seeing more mixed bodies. I just don't know if the way we're seeing them authentically represents the actual experiences of mixed people. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on. I can't say for sure because it's still fairly new. What I do see is I'm seeing mixed folks appear, but they very seldom get to play actual mixed people. So they're playing like some other character. So for example, Crazy Rich Asians just came out, and the lead actor in that film is actually a mixed man, but his character's not mixed in the movie. And there was a little bit of controversy around his casting even, that he wasn't Asian enough to be in the movie. So that's an example of like, well, him being in the movie was not necessarily empowering for him as a mixed person. It may have been empowering for certain groups of Asian Americans, but as a mixed person, I don't think it served that purpose. So we'll see.
Do you think in our last presidency with Barack Obama, do you think that inspired mixed race people to become better? And that's the question for both of you.
Yeah. I would love to hear
Because
your thoughts.
in America that wasn't happening. They really didn't want him to win. In all honesty. So I think so. I think he had to do good, to make an example of what America think that we are.
Do you think because he got the popular votes, do you think, is it because of that, or is it because, people accepted that he was a mixed race individual, not just black?
No, they never.
African American.
To be honest, they never really accepted him. But I can tell you what, they accepted him because they knew he was going to do a good job. That's why people voted for him. They believed in him, like his slogan says. So that's why I think that's why he was so popular. And right now, today, he's still loved.
Do you really think they accepted him for what he would bring to the table as far as, the presidency, or do you think a lot of people just had compassion for him and said, "Oh well, he's part of the percentage of the white nation and then percentage of the African American nation"? Well,
to be honest, I don't think the white side ever accepted him. To be honest, but I think people believed in him. I think that's why he got in.
I think that I differ.
Okay.
I think that a lot of white Americans said, "Wow, we got this half African American and half white man," and just think about what his mother had to go through, and I think that compassion, from white Americans saying that his mother said, "Wow, she had to go through a lot to bring him up. I'm going to vote for him." What are your takes on it?
Well, and I'm sure everybody remembers that Obama grew up in Hawaii.
Right?
And I talk about Obama a little bit in this book because when I was on Oahu, I'd go to these shave ice shops. There were pictures of him on like every wall.
Wow.
Because he would visit and he'd go to get shave ice. And I talk about like the complication of Obama. You know, I don't know how he personally identifies. I know there was a lot of like anxiety in the public about, is he mixed, is he black, what is he, oh my God. So I'm not going to speak to that, but I will say that during his presidency, I was curating a lot of content for the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference at that time. Up until that point, it was like really hard to find any articles on mixed race people, any books, anything. And during his presidency, it opened up, and there was like all this room for people to at least talk about it. And they were publishing think pieces and people's stories, and it was so great. And then 45, I call him 45 because I don't say his name, became president, and it just all. And now I just can't find anything anymore. So in terms of mixed race, I will say that I think just Obama being in office opened that up for the rest of society. And then when he left, I noticed a big difference. So that was sad.
Yeah, but do you think that more white Americans, I mean, if you look at the votes and you say, hey, more white Americans or versus black Americans voted for him, you know what I'm saying, or how vice versa.
But see, the white folks was always attacking him, where the black folks uplifted him. So that's why I felt the way I felt.
Well, I think that, like I said, I think that they felt so much compassion for him.
I didn't see compassion.
Nope,
I seen attack.
You know,
one day it is, one day that, questioning his birth certificate. I mean, how
well,
low can you be?
That was the left wing that did that. I mean, we know that the left wing, you know, did that. But I think that, you know, and I think that black Americans, they said, okay, especially those that have been going through this in the 60s, they said, wow, you know, that, hey, we got this black man, you know, and I think people felt that on each side. You know, said, hey, we got this half black man with a white mother, you know, and said, wow, we're gonna vote for him because of his mom, you know, and then you had some black individuals and multi-race individuals that they said, hey, you know, because of him, you know, and of his African American nationality, we're gonna vote for him. And you know, it's the first black man ever, you know.
And his father living in Africa, you know. So yes.
So I think both. I think it kind of, you know, played on both sides.
Okay, that's your opinion.
and that's just my opinion.
I respect your opinion.
Yeah, and this is like exactly what I want to see more of, by the way.
Okay.
And this like what happens when mixed bodies appear in front of our society, which is really racist, let's just say it, and really racialized. What does this bring up for us in terms of like boundaries and who has privilege and who doesn't, and like those are the things that I would like us to all be talking about more, because the impact, like, we don't really know what that was like for Obama as he was going through all that. I think he kept it pretty quiet. Couldn't afford to really say too much. So my question is always like, when I see this happen, I'm like, okay, everybody is saying their truth, and that's really important, and then I also want to make sure the mixed voices are coming through that. And it's like, what does it feel like when you're caught between? And you're sort of like, you have this white mother, and so white folks may see you as more acceptable to a degree, but you're still a black man to them, right? He got more death threats than any president has ever had. So that wouldn't happen to a white man.
Exactly.
But then, you know, and so just being caught in between all of this, those are the conversations, like exactly what you two are doing. Great.
And then you look at, you know, in politics, you look at the Fords. You know, they've got, you know, some mix in the Fords, and that's coming up through politics. And look at Jeb Bush. You know, these are Republicans, you know, that's coming up, and they have mixed race in the family.
And one of our older presidents, he has a daughter with a slave. She's biracial, you see, and you know, he just, you know, showcased the white daughters, but not too much the biracial one.
And there's some like real pain in this stuff, right? A lot of it goes back to slavery or to, you know, to what happened to Native folks and the theft of their, and so like bringing that forwards, I think is really important to talk about.
That's right. So since you're a photographer, are you going to open up your very own gallery?
Oh my gosh.
Because I wanted to ask about your photography.
You dream so big. Not yet.
Okay.
I'm building my body of work.
Okay.
But I've thought about trying to exhibit small.
4 minutes? Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
This was a great conversation. That's why we're like, no, it can't be over. In Seattle, we've got a lot of coffee shops, no surprise, and a lot of them put up art, kind of small level exhibits. So I have a friend who's encouraging me, who's an artist.
Yes. I think you should open up your own gallery.
Oh my gosh.
Because you're a photographer. And I know you would do well.
I'll remember that. The
Yeah,
Sears
I know you'd do well. Don't build it here. Build it.
Oh, well, you never know. So.
No. Recession.
Oh, yeah, that's real.
And final question, do you hear from your readers, and how would they contact you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah. I have a website, SharonHChang.com, and there's like a contact form. I'm sorry that I don't put my email out in public, but let's talk about women of color getting attacked online. That's like a real thing.
Okay.
So I don't do that anymore. But I have a contact form that goes straight to me. I'm also on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so I check those every day too, and that's a great place. People get in touch with me various ways. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. You got any last words?
One more time, can you let the viewers know when your books come out?
Oh, yeah. So Raising Mixed Race is already out. You can get it in typical places, probably Amazon you're familiar with. Hoppa Tales and Other Lies comes out September 15th.
All right.
And she's going on tour. Look out for that.
Yep.
All the information's on her site. Come out and support her.
All right, Hartford. Hey, well, we appreciate our special guest being here, and yeah, we'd love to have you again, and just keep us
Next
updated
time
about
I'm
what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just keep us updated. All right, Hartford. We'll see you next week, same time, same channel. We got about 3 more minutes.
Oh,
3 more
okay.
minutes left.
Do you have any advice for inspiring authors?
Oh, yes. I'm self-publishing my new book. You should consider that. It's really hard for marginalized writers of color, to get into the publishing industry, which is really white, male-dominated. Just know that this technology is really accessible now. Think about it.
Right.
All right.
We don't need to do it their way.
All right, Hartford. Hey, if you got questions, inbox me. I'll make sure we get it to Mr. Chang and Mr. Chang, and should be all set. Instagram, Hartford Community Leaders, HartfordCommunityLeaders.com. Visit us also on Mac Talk Radio on Wednesdays from 11 a.m. to 12 o'clock p.m. All right, Hartford, we'll see you next time, same channel. God bless.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Great.
That was
great.
so fun.
Yes.
Right.
Welcome. And I'll send a review to you.
Yes.
I did type it.